Hello, everyone. My name is Marianne Rapuano, and I think we'll get started. Some other folks are supposed to join us, but hopefully they can just hop on and catch up with us as we're going along here. I'd like to thank you for attending the What's New in Fravo Liveforms 8.0 webinar with me. I would ask one thing as we go through the information here. If you could hold your questions to the end, that would. I think we're going to have some time at the end. So if you could hold your questions at the end, we can address them then, or I could address them after the presentation, if that's okay. All right, what is new in Fravo Liveforms version 8? Well, quite a bit, actually. Let's take a look. Version 8 is all about simplifying workflow design. And we've made a lot of big changes in the Flow Designer, which I think you're going to be pleased with. As a result of those changes, the Flow Designer is easier to use, it's more intuitive, and the whole goal of the project was to simplify flow design, make it easier, provide more help so you can do it quickly and efficiently, without having to go to too many different places. Version 8.0 is a cloud-only release, but never fear, in-house customers, you will. There is going to be an in-house release probably the beginning of next year that's going to contain all of these features that we're going to cover today, and probably some more. So if you want to hang in and check it out, it's still worthwhile. The improvements that we made in 8.0 are based on our customer feedback and input from the Fravo client services team. And we really do listen to you guys, so we appreciate any feedback that you can give us. And I think a lot of the things you're going to see are the result of your comments to us. Oh, what's with the phone? Sorry about that. Okay, so what do we do? Well, what you're going to find is that we pretty much redesigned the Flow Designer canvas, and the point of the redesign was to make the flow routing clearer, meaning, when you look at it, you know immediately what routing your flow is going to take. The existing flows that you have, once the upgrade is done, all of your existing flows are going to automatically be converted to the new format after the upgrade, and we'll talk about that new format in a minute. Another big change that we made with respect to designing flows is we now made it pretty simple to set up an anonymous workflow step in your workflow. Previous versions, it was a little bit involved. You had to pull in, an email or an anonymous task step, and then you had to make a step after that, and then there was a lot of things that were required in previous versions. In 8.0, all that goes away. If you want to add an anonymous workflow step, and by that I mean a step that's performed by a non-authenticated user, someone outside the Fravo tenant, then it's very simple. All you do in 8.0 is assign it to an email address, and we'll take a look at that. Now, if you use our new simple anonymous workflow step and you do assign it to an email address, You also get the ability to reject to that step. This was a big, this was something people requested quite a bit. And we also have the ability now for tenant and flow admins to reassign that step to a different email address. So those are two good reasons to go with the 8.0 version of the anonymous step, which is simply to assign it to an email address. Now, we made some big changes in the configuration of the flow step properties. And what we've got now is a flow step properties wizard, which we'll take a good look at. But it's really a series of tabs, a tab for each of remember all those properties that you had to set up on the flow step? They're all now on tabs. It's easier. We provide help for you, and I'll show you all the different ways that things that we've added to make it easier. When we get into the new designer, we've added this thing called the Properties Navigator, and this is kind of cool actually, because this allows you to see immediately the important properties that are set up for that step in your workflow. You click on the workflow and the Properties Navigator shows up on the left side, and you get like just a snapshot of what's set up on that for that step, and that always helps when you're making changes to your flows. The next one I think you're going to love. It's a View My Task feature, and this is something that many people have requested. And what it is a way for a user to take a look at the step that they completed in the workflow in a read-only view. The classic example, of course, is an expense statement, right, or a leave request. You fill out the step one of the flow, and then you send it off to your manager for approval, right? 3 days later, you say, "Oh man, I want to see what I put for this. All right, did I put the right dates in? Whatever." With this View My Task, as long as you performed the task, you can now go into search the workflow, find your task, and there's an icon there that'll now show you the actual form with the data that you submitted. And this could be really helpful. Another big change is the refresh of searchable fields. In 8.0, you could do it for a single form or flow as opposed to having to do it for the whole tenant. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, there's a lot more features than what I just went over. I've added just a couple just to make you aware of a change to the message control and some text that we changed on the access control list permissions descriptions. But I would encourage you to review the 8.0 detailed release notes to get the complete list of all the improvements and changes that are included in version 8.0. All right, so let's get going here. So I said we redesigned the Flow Designer canvas. Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, what it means is your workflow is now presented in a flowchart-like format. We got start and end steps. We have a guide box for the first step of the flow. We have a cool little bullseye that helps you with step placement. As you add steps to your flow, you're going to see that there are arrows are automatically drawn as in the flow chart. When you click on a step, you'll see, depending on the step type, you'll see a series of action icons, meaning, an HTTP step is going to have different icons than a new form or a form that you dragged in from your forms library to be a step in your workflow. The Properties Navigator is very, very helpful. As I mentioned, it gives you a snapshot of what's set up on that step, the properties, the important properties for that step. And lastly, we're now going to represent preconditions as a yellow decision diamond in the Flow Designer. And this is all intended, of course, to help you, realize at a quick glance how the flow is going to go, especially when it comes to preconditions. That could be a little tricky. So I think the yellow decision diamond will help with that. So let's take a look. All right, this is what it looks like now. In 8.0, this is what it's going to look like. All right, this is the new format. When you click on one of these steps, you're going to see on the left side the Properties Navigator, which is showing you the properties that are set up for that particular step. Just a quick glance there. And now we have this little cog here, the Edit Step Properties icon. You can click it here on the step, or you can click it actually, in fact, you'll see it inside the sections of the Properties Navigator, but you can click the icon there, or you can click anywhere inside this Properties Navigator, and it'll bring you to what we're calling the Flow Step Properties Wizard. But really, what that is a series of tabs for each of the properties, that we used to set up in the Flow Designer before. The functions of the properties pretty much remain the same. We kind of reorganized them and tried to make them, make more sense. But for the most part, what you knew before of these properties, they pretty much do the same thing. All right, so let's break this down a little bit. All right, we said here's the new flow chart. Now, when the upgrade is done on Saturday, your existing flows are going to automatically be converted to this format. All right, so you'll see this flow chart-like format. Note we have a start and end steps. You can't really do anything with those. They're just there, okay, to give you the start and end of your flow. When you make create a new flow, you're going to see a guide box for the first step. I'll show you that. And as you drag and drop steps onto the canvas, you're going to notice that the arrows are automatically drawn as you add them. All right, that's all good. This is I like this a lot, actually. We now have this bullseye will help with step placement. For example, when you're dragging something from the palette, you're going to drop it in there. I know I always used to lose it. Sometimes I have to do it more than once. Well, now when you're adding or moving steps, up, down, whatever, we're providing this flashing green bullseye. And the deal is, when you see that bullseye, you move your step. When you see that bullseye, drop it. And once you drop it, when you drop it, it'll be placed in the intended position. All right, I mentioned the action icons. All right, when you click on a step, depending on the step type, you're going to get different icons. All right, they're the same icons, except for the cog here. The cog's new. But the other ones I think you'll probably be familiar with. But depending on what kind of step you're dropping in, if it's a new form or an existing form from your forms library, you're going to get these 5 icons, right? The cog, which brings you to the properties wizard. This is the link to create a link step. This is the download this step as a standalone form. This is all the same. None of this changed. The pencil, of course, if you click that, that will allow you to edit the step in the Forms Designer, in the Flow Designer, as always. And the delete, of course, to delete the step. Now, if you have an HTTP, a summary, or a linked step, you're not going to get all these 5, of course. You'll get the cog for the properties, and you'll get the delete icon. And now you're going to notice, if you have workflows out there that have email or anonymous task steps, they're going to show up in this new format, but they're only going to have a couple of icons. They're going to have probably the cog and the minus for the delete. So they'll fall in this category here. All right, let's talk a little bit about link steps. I mean, this is always a concept that could be a little bit confusing. I think we've added some stuff that's going to help with this. As you know, when you add a link step in a workflow, you click the chain icon. All right, well, that's the same. So if you're going to add a linked step, you click the chain, of course, to create that step. And what is a linked step? Well, it's a copy of the parent form. And this is the full design where you set up sections in step 1 of your workflow, and you write rules to show and hide it, and you create your linked steps for those sections. Well, in the new Flow Designer, a link step is represented by a double box. So you see this? So immediately you're going to know that the payment, the dining room, and the checkout steps here are, they're linked steps, which means they're a copy of some parent form. So what do you do if you have, a parent form that has some linked steps, and then you have another parent form that has linked steps? Well, what we've done is we now have an on-hover feature that if you hover over the name of the linked step now, it'll show you the name of the parent form. And this could be very helpful if you have if you have a workflow where you have more than one parent form with linked steps. The Properties Navigator, again, okay, when you click on a workflow step, the Properties Navigator is going to show up on the left side of the Flow Designer canvas. And again, this panel shows information about the important properties that are set up for this flow step. Not all of the properties are shown. We pick the most important ones, and that's what shows up, for the different step types. And that's what shows up in this Properties Navigator. But if you click on the cog inside the Properties Navigator, or you click anywhere inside a section of the Properties Navigator, it'll take you right to the tab for that section. So if you click in here, you'll go right to the assignment tab, or if you click the cog, which you don't see in the picture, but I'll show you in a minute. If you click that, that'll take you directly to the tab. If you click the cog on the actual step, it's going to open up, the wizard and show you all the tabs, and then you have to select the tab that you're looking for. So the Properties Navigator is in effect a shortcut to get you where you got to go quickly. Now, preconditions. All right, obviously, preconditions is a property, of a workflow step, and so we're going to have a tab for it in our flow step properties wizard. When you go to that tab, you actually see that there is a toggle to turn on the precondition builder. It's on by default. That's our little cut down version of the visual rule builder that you can use to create a precondition on a step. Well, you can turn it off with the toggle and just type your JavaScript there if you're more comfortable doing that. Or you can just go ahead and click Edit, and that'll pop up the precondition builder and your precondition. Now, once you get the precondition in there, there's a couple other things here. We now have this precondition description, and it's a field where you can enter kind of a user-friendly text so that anyone looking at it knows immediately what the precondition's for. So you can customize that description here, and it'll show up in this yellow decision diamond, which is how we're portraying or representing a precondition in the new Flow Designer. A precondition, of course, is part of the step that immediately follows it. You can't select it separately, of course. But you'll notice inside of it, there's another cog. And if you click there, it's going to take, that's another way that you can get to the precondition tab by just clicking that cog there. So you can click here, you can click here. Oops, you can do that. Right, to get to the precondition tab. On the Properties Navigator, once you have it set up, you'll see the actual precondition or an explanation of the precondition and the actual logic. And if you type in a description, it'll show up in the diamond. Now, of course, the whole idea here is, a precondition is something that if you put it on a step, then the step only executes if the precondition is true. So the point of these arrows is to show you that, right? If condition is true, yes, you're going to go ahead and execute that step. If it's not true, then you're going to skip that step, which is how preconditions work forever, right? Okay, so let's take a look. What is she talking about? Well, let's go to the Flows tab. All right, here's what, when you begin, you create a new workflow, this is what you're going to see. All you're going to see are the start and end steps, and then this is a guide box. You only see this for step 1. All right, now, the palette looks the same as it did in previous releases. However, you may notice there's no anonymous task and there's no or email, depending on the release that you're familiar with. Those have been removed from the palette because, as I mentioned earlier, an anonymous task is now simply assigned to an email address. So we don't need those extra steps in the flow anymore, which is a good thing. All right, so what do you see? Well, what you always saw, right? You could drag in a new form, you could drag in a summary, you could drag in an HTTP step, or you could pull a form from your forms library. So I'm just going to drop step 1 into my workflow here, and I'm going to click on it. Here's all my icons. Here's the Properties Navigator, right? I can see immediately on this step there's no tasks assigned, there's no preconditions, the reject is set up to here and from here, which I may want to change. There's no escalations, and I'm not sending any emails after the step is over, is completed. All right, that's all cool. So now I want to make a new step, right? I'm going to make a linked step, as I'm sure you're all familiar with. And if I make this link step, well, first thing I want to do is click on it, and then I want to change the name. I'm going to change the name to Sales. All right, now if I hover over the name of the link step, you can see that it's saying the sales step is linked from the PO step. Again, if you have more than one of these, parent link form combinations, that's going to be helpful. All right, let me make another link step. All right, this is going to be my VP step. Okay, now I want to move the sales step up here, right? I want the VP step to come after that. So I'm going to just drag it. And as I begin to move, as I move it up, see that flashing bullseye? That's telling me to drop it. So if I drop it when I see the flashing bullseye, it should go where I want it to go. So that I found very helpful. All right, let's say I want to set up a precondition here on my VP step. All right, again, I could click here, click the cog, I could click in here, or I could click there and go and select the precondition tab. Note the precondition builder is on by default, so I'm just going to click the edit so I can do one. So let's say I want to add a precondition that says I want if the total amount is equal or more than 10,000, and then I want to put some kind of user in there, see what happens, and I click to submit. I end up with this yellow decision diamond, which is telling me that, okay, you got a precondition here and it's related to this step, and if it's yes, we're going to perform the VP step, and if it's no, we're going to skip it. And by the way, here's the precondition. In case you're wondering, this is what it is. Note the link step here is portrayed by a double box, meaning it's a copy of something, right? Okay. So that's the new Flow Designer canvas, and I think you're going to find it very helpful. The next thing I want to talk about is this simple anonymous flow step, okay? First of all, just as a refresher, an anonymous step is a workflow step that's performed by a non-authenticated user. There's a million examples, right? A purchase order, a statement of work, where the first step is filled in by someone in your company, let's say, and then it's sent out to your customer for approval and signature. All right, that's classic situation to set up a anonymous flow step. In the previous versions of Lifeforms, as I mentioned, you had to drag an email or an anonymous task step from the palette and drop it onto the canvas. And then you had to create a step after that, which was the step that the actual anonymous user saw. The email or anonymous task got configured to an email address, and it sent the email, and then it advanced the flow to the next step. Well, that was a little bit confusing and a tad cumbersome. In AO, you don't have to worry about any of that, right? You create the step that you want your non-authenticated user to see, and you simply route the step to an email address. You do this on the assignment tab, and when you click the assignment tab, you're going to see that there's obviously other things that you can assign a step to, user and role, I'm sure you're very familiar with. The new one, of course, is email address. So if you're going to assign a step to an email address, you type it in the assign to email, no login required, which says, okay, this could be performed as by an anonymous user, this step. So you fill in template or email address here for what you want to do, and you leave the other two blank. The other two is assigned to user and assigned to role, which I'll show you in a minute. But now there's on this tab, and you'll see it in some of the other tabs. Also, we have a little bit of error checking. For example, if you type in an email address that's doesn't match the pattern for an email address, we're going to let you know. If it's not valid, we're going to say, hey, you got you need to put in a valid email address here. Right, and if you ignore that, right, you say, and you go ahead and you click another tab. If there's a validation error on any tab, the tab will display in red, and that's telling you right away that you have something there that needs your attention. If there's more than one, you'll just see them. They'll show up in red in order, in their order here. Now, okay. Well, while we're on the topic, assign to user and assign to role. Okay, this is all cool. And you're going to see on all these tabs, we have links to the docs. We have these drop downs that provide, and we have a little help text. If you hover over the fields, something will pop up to remind you, what the function of the property is. You can pick, in these drop downs, you're going to see, fields from your flow. You're going to see special templates. You're going to see flow templates, whatever is appropriate for the property that you're trying to set up. So you'll see a lot of things to pick from here, and I'll show you that in a minute. Just a note here on the assignment tab, this is also where you now set up your task notification emails for each step. Okay, so it's assignment and task notification on the same tab. You'll notice some of these properties are now grouped in a more logical order. So we've elected to put the task notification email here, the configuration of it. And there's a default, and of course, you can customize. But one thing I want to mention about this tab, there's really three things that you can assign a user, a step to: a user, a role, or an email address. And at runtime, they, Lifeforms, there's a priority at runtime. So user's top priority, role is next, and email address is last. Now, why do I care about that? Well, the only reason you care about that is because as you fill in these fields, you're going to see, for example, sometimes these fields will get grayed out. What I mean by that, if you assign a user to the step, it's going to gray out the role and the email address, because if you put those in, it's going to ignore them because you got a user assigned. If you don't assign a user and you assign a role, the email address should be grayed out, but not the user, because you could still assign a user. Of course, if you do that, the user is going to take priority. It's just like it was before, but it's kind of like a visual representation of that. So you'll see that on some of the tabs as we go through. So this is just a quick reminder. If you are not familiar with the anonymous step, the way it used to be in Fravo, in versions pre-8.0, you had to pull from the palette either an email or anonymous task step, and then you had to create a step after that, and then you had to write rules, and over here you put your email address, and this was actually the screen that the anonymous user saw. Forget all that. Don't have to do that now. You got in 8.0, you have the first step, which is filled in this particular PO. First step is filled in by the salesperson, and when they click continue or on step 1, it goes right to the email address that you configured. And this is the screen, this is the step that the non-authenticated user is going to see. Much simpler. Now, as I mentioned, you're going to have, once the upgrade is done, you're going to have, if you have email, you have workflows existing today that have email or anonymous task steps in them, they're going to work. Okay, they're definitely going to work. There might be a reason to try to convert them over to the new simple anonymous format, and we'll talk about that in a second. But just for now, the audit trail, in your audit trail, if you run a workflow that has an email anonymous task, and you look at the audit trail, you're going to see it in a waiting state. It's going to say waiting, like pretty much like it always did. But if you create a flow that's assigned to an email address, it's going to say pending. and it's going to give you the email address that it was sent to in the audit trail. So that could be very helpful. So here's an example of that. Email was a few versions back, anonymous step, but they were the same thing, right? In the audit trail, you'll see waiting, and that's pretty much all you saw. However, if you change your workflow over to use the sign to an email address, the audit trail will show the task as pending when it's out to the customer, and it will show you the email address, that it was sent to for email. So that could be helpful when you're trying to figure out what happened to, I sent the email, the customer didn't really send it back to me. I don't know what's going on. You want to confirm that it went to that person, things like that. There's a lot of reasons to look at the audit trail there. So that's helpful. Another thing, flow visibility. You know that whole thing about who can use the permission, the access control list permission, who can use the flow, the former flow. Well, with anonymous in previous releases, if you had an anonymous step in your flow, you had to set the flow to public. In 8.0, you don't have to do that. So there are situations when you might want to, make the actual flow public and tenant because you want it to be started by certain individuals in your company, etc. But you still want to send something out to the anonymous user. Now you can do that in 8.0. Another cool thing is that, as I mentioned earlier, tenant and flow admins can reassign the task to another email address. I mean, I'm sure it's a rare occasion, but if you sent the PO out and you find out that the person who you sent it to is no longer in charge or left the company or whatever, it's possible for a tenant or flow admin to reassign that particular task to another email address. That's something Frevo, I believe, might take advantage of when it comes to our statements of work, etc. Also, and this is a cool thing, you can now configure rejection to an anonymous step. All right? If you want to reject back to the customer, you can do it now. You can set up a reject button, like you don't have to go through shenanigans to get the reject button on there. So these are two big reasons, I think, to think about maybe changing your flows, your existing flows that have an email or an anonymous step in them, to use the simple anonymous flow step, because the rejection and reassign features are not available for workflows with email anonymous task steps in them. They will work, but these extra features are not available. So there might be a little bit of manual work that has to happen here if you want to take advantage of these two features. And the other thing I want to mention is that the email anonymous task step are only going to be supported for a limited number of releases. There's no rush, no panic. But you might want to think about changing them over, when you get a chance, because at some point down the road we may stop supporting them. All right, so those are probably three good reasons to think about converting them over. The conversion is manual, and I urge you to read this migration page when you get a chance, because it talks about a lot of the things that we're talking about today, but there's a bunch of other stuff that I think you might, you want to be aware of. But what I want to point out is there's a whole section here with some steps to follow if you want to, take a moment, to convert your existing flows over to the simple anonymous. Just something to think about for now. All right, so let's go take a quick look. Let's take a look at the OPO. Right now, in this workflow, it's pretty clear what's going on here. The PO is filled in by the salesperson in a company, let's say, and then it goes to the client for approval and signature, and then it comes, if the client approves or whatever, comes back to the salesperson for review. It goes to the manager for approval, and then if there's if you have a condition like the total amount is greater than or equal to 10,000, it goes to the VP. It'll perform the VP step. Otherwise, it ends. All right, great. So let's look at this client approval step, because this is, if I click on that, I see there's no assignment there. Client approval, if I click on the cog and go to the assignment tab, here's the assignment tab, and I see that in this particular workflow, it's assigned to an email address, and I've selected it from the drop down here, which showed me a bunch of controls in my flows in template form, right? Of course, I could type a valid email address in there, or I could, use a field in my flow as a template. Now, you saw the drop down actually showed me some fields there, client email. But if you don't see it in the list because it doesn't show you all the fields, you could type the curly brace there and then start typing if you know the field name, and it should pop that field right up. And once you select it, it's going to add it with the closing curly brace. All right, note I've assigned it to an email address. What if I decided, well, okay, no, I think I maybe want a user. See what happens when I assign it to a user now. These are, when you click these are type aheads. Or you can click the drop down here to display a list of the users in your tenant. But notice that once I selected my user, the role and email address field got grayed out. Because as we were mentioned before, there's a runtime priority. So if you have a user, you're not getting any of the other ones. Right, and here, of course, is your the subject for the task notification email. Again, the drop downs. Now, what's the deal with these drop downs? Well, there's a bunch of things. Like, there's not only templates from your flow. There's, in the list, you'll see different flow templates that you might want to use. You'll see common templates like subject ID, subject email, subject reports to is very common. Typically, a step could be routed to the user's manager. Right, if you use that, so there's a bunch of these, and you'll see some task templates as well. The list and perform. Same with the message for the task notification email. If you're doing something like escalations, you'll see even more templates. For example, in this list for escalations, there should be a whole section on. Let's see, common escalation templates that you can use in the, in your reminder emails or whatever. So these are going to change, based on where you are, what step you're actually, what property you're actually working on. I might as well, let me mention this now because, actually, I think it's coming up, but while we're at it, it's the one thing you need to know about this is that none of the changes get saved unless you click the submit button. So what does that mean? Well, okay, if I'm just clicking on one tab, right, if I just need to change one thing in the general settings, of course, I'm going to go change it, and then I'm going to click submit, right? That's pretty normal. But how about if I pop this up and I make a change here, and I go here and I make changes, I make changes, I make changes. As you go through the tabs, your changes don't get saved. Nothing gets saved until you hit submit. So you want to keep that in mind. Okay, so that's pretty much the Navigator and some of the how to set up the simple anonymous. That brings us to the full step properties wizard. And I'm calling it that, but in fact, it's that series of tabs that we were just looking at. And what we've done is reorganize them, so that they make more sense. They're more logically grouped. But pretty much the functions remain the same. One or two may have varied a little bit, but hopefully we have enough help on the screen or in the docs to get you going. So the properties are based on the step type. As you saw, you click on the step, right? You get a different set of icons. The edit step properties, the cog, is what brings up this flow step properties wizard. And again, you can click on the step and then click on the cog. You can click in a section of the properties navigator, and it'll take you right to that tab, whatever the section is, right? Or you can click on the cog inside the properties navigator, and that'll take you directly to the tab. Okay, on each tab, you're going to see, if you hover over the field, right, there's going to be some explanatory text that pops up to help you as you're configuring your properties. Every single tab has a direct link to the live forms documentation, so if you need to do that, you can just click that. It should take you right there. As you saw, we have the pick list for fields for the different drop downs that can be filtered by typing ahead. You can pick controls from your flow, the built-in live form templates, and if of course you want dynamic behavior, you can pull any field from your flow by typing the left curly brace, start typing the control name if you know the control name. And it'll filter the list. And as soon as you select it, it'll add it in with the closing curly brace. Very important. Remember, nothing's saved unless you click submit, okay? So if you're clicking around on the tabs, your changes aren't going to be saved until you click the submit button. As we saw before, the tabs with validation errors are displayed in red with a red asterisk. And on some tabs, as we saw on the assignment tab, we try to help as you're setting up your properties. We'll gray out some irrelevant fields, as you're configuring. All right, this is the assignment tab again. We're pretty familiar with this by now, I think. But this is just the error checking, the drop downs, and the help. Actually, this, if you hover over the field, it tells you what to do. So this is a hover over the username. So type a partial username and select add it. Okay, that's a little tip there. Up on top of the tab, you'll find a link to the documentation that describes this tab and everything on it, hopefully. Okay, so let's take a quick look at some of these real quick. Let's go to manager. All right, so, the settings tab is pretty straightforward. It's all the settings that you're familiar with. Again, there's no link to the docs. So, if you need some clarification, it should take you right to the section in the documentation that describes that. Assignment we pretty much talked about. I like to just point out, now you can put all your messages on one tab, which I think is kind of cool. So you can, set up task information, history message, or pending messages for your steps, which is good. Rejection is set up as a if you select from here. you get the option to set up the button, the reject button label, and you can customize the rejection email, and you can pull templates from the drop down that are that apply to this if you wish. Precondition tab we talked about, again, link to the docs there. This is a toggle, so if you want to turn it off, you simply slide it, and you can add your JavaScript there if you prefer that. Okay. Escalations, they're set up the same way. It's just that the tabs look a little different. The layout looks a little different. You still have to select a condition. You have to select an action. And then you can select notifications or reminders. Just a note, notifications and reminders, there's a toggle here. So anything that wasn't required, you'll probably see a toggle that you have to use to set it up. So look for that. That's the escalate. This email, this is here's another toggle, right? But this is the if you remember in the previous versions we had activity doc actions, and one of the things you could do was send an email after the step was completed. If you wanted your users to have a copy of the workflow after stage 2 or whatever, step 2, then you could set up an activity doc action which send an email with a PDF so they can have it for their records. Well, the next feature we're going to talk about eliminates the need for that. However, if there is, I'm sure there's plenty of reasons to send emails after a step is completed, but if you need to do that, then you need to turn this on and fill in this wizard. And this is pretty much the same wizard that we're used to. The webhook is the other one, the post, the HTTP post to an external web application. This was the other activity doc action that you could set up to occur after the step is completed, right? So this is the same. Again, a link to the docs, and it's a toggle type thing. Same for quick approval, because these are not often used, but they are used. So we turned them off by default, and you have to turn them on if you want to do that. And now there's a tab to configure geolocation. Again, a link to the doc. This all used to be on the left properties panel, if you remember. All right, remember that no changes are saved unless you click submit. Very important. All right. Now, this one, I think, made us all happy here, and I'm hoping it's going to make you happy too. We have a new feature in 8.0 called View My Task, or View a Task, if you will. And it all has to do with the audit trail, which we all know shows the progress and history of a workflow. Well, now we have the ability for a user to look at the step that they performed and was submitted earlier in a workflow. And again, I gave the example before of an expense statement, right? You fill in the expense statement, you send it off to your manager for approval, and now 3 days later you want to check something on it, right? Well, in 8.0, you can search for your task, and we have a new icon called the View icon, and it's a little eye there. You click on the eye, and when you click on the eye, you're going to see a read-only view of the step of the workflow that you performed. Now, it's only going to show you the steps that the user performed, right? It's not going to show steps that other user performed, so like they can't see the manager approval, etc. But it will show you a read-only view of the step that you perform, and on it you're going to see a watermark, which pretty much says, hey, this is a read-only view. You can look at this data, but you can't change it. All right, well, what about something like a screen flow? If you recall, screen flows are a series of consecutive steps in a workflow that are performed by the same user. We have a feature called Save on Navigate, which actually creates multiple submissions. What about this view thing when it comes to those types of tasks? Well, if it's a screen flow for something that has more than one screen, let's say, more than one submission, what we've done is provided a next button, and so the user will start at the beginning of the screen flow, or the multiple submissions, the first one, and then we'll give you a next button to move forward. And you can only go forward at this point. So if you need to go backwards, you're going to have to go back to the beginning. You click the audit trail icon again. All right, one of the exciting things about this feature is it may eliminate the need to design your workflows to send an email to the user at the completion of a step for record keeping, right? If you don't want to do that, now you don't have to, because they can look themselves at their task for the information. All right, so this is the audit trail, right? An example of the audit trail, and note the little eye icon there, the view icon. And if Michael Butler, who's if he clicked on this view, it'll show him the step that he performed. Let's say Michael Butler was a new employee and he just completed a new employee workflow. And the way the new employee onboarding flow works that I used here, of course, is the new employee completes the first 4 steps of the workflow, and then it gets sent off to HR to complete the processing. Well, if you find the task and then you click on the eye, you'll see these 4 steps, but you'll see this one first, and down the bottom there'll be a next button. As you click the next, you'll advance to the other screens, and when you hit the 4th one, you can't go anymore, of course, because that's all the user participated in. And if you want to go back to the beginning, you got to click the audit trail icon. Okay, so let's take a very brief look at this. Let me just do my task here. I'm going to search for an expense report. I believe it's the second one there. All right, now this is an expense report that's already been submitted, right? It's all done. But if I click on the audit trail, I see all the steps, right? Tells me it was pending for Jack, and then we had an escalation set up, and it was reassigned, and then it was pending for Sue, and it was finally submitted by Sue, blah, blah, blah. But say Jack wants to check and see what was submitted, right? All you have to do is click on the eye. And this is the read-only view that the user will see. Let me just bring that down a little bit. All right, note, you got the watermark here, which says, okay, this is read-only, so you can't change anything. But this is, in fact, what you submitted. All right, and that's it. There's no next. You can't go anywhere else, because the only step that Jack participated in or performed was step 1. All right, what about a employee onboarding? Let's take a look at that. So if I do that, again, this one is actually hasn't been submitted. This is in a pending state. So basically, the employee filled in the first, 4 screens. This one has save on Navigate selected, so it did a bunch of saves along the way, right? But right now, Jack can see that his paperwork is pending for HR, for someone in HR to process it. If you click the I, now you get, the read-only watermark again. And now you click the next button. It shows you the next screen, and then the next one, and then the next one. And finally, you can't go anymore because Jack only participated in the first 4 steps, and now the flow is sitting in it for HR. So that's something, you may want to think about. Now that we have this feature, it might affect, the way you're designing your workflows. This is probably the last big feature that I'm going to talk about, and then there's a couple of tiny ones I just want to mention real quick. But this searchable fields business, you recall when you set up searchable fields are fields from your flow that you can use as search criteria, right, in the table, in the submissions table or the task search. And the designer pretty much sets them up, right? Let's be honest, things change, right? As you're going along, your people say, hey, we need this, we need that, da-da-da. So let's say you have to make a change to the searchable fields for your form or flow, right? Well, before you had to, you made your changes, and then if you wanted the previous submissions to reflect the changes, you had to run what we were calling a insight batch job, or on your entire tenant. So if you were a cloud customer, you had to contact us. We had to do it for you, in off hours. If you're an in-house customer, same thing. You had to run the job at off hours and whatever. But now some of that goes away because, and also you had to be an admin, right, in order to do that. Well, now what we've done is designers and any user that gets the who can edit the form flow permission can run this refresh searchable fields process, and that's what we're calling Insight Batch Job now. And for an individual form or flow without requiring admin privileges. So again, when would you do this? Well, you would of course do this if you made a change to your searchable fields. And how do you do this? Well, there's a new icon on the forms homepage and the flows homepage, this little blue guy over here. And you click that, and it brings you into the UI, and you follow the instructions. The one thing you have to kind of remember is, and we suggest, is if you're doing this on a production form or flow, it's really best to run this refresh searchable fields process when the form and flow is not being used. So you still should do it on the off hours, but it's way easier to do because all you have to really do is click this guy on your flows and your forms and your flows homepage. You now see this icon, which will allow you to run the job. Excuse me, for a single flow. So what is that? Take a quick look at that. Let's go to the flows. Let's go to the expense report, right? My favorite today, I guess. Searchable fields, we haven't changed anything on the flow properties yet, so those are going to stay the same. You recall, you get this little wizard where you set up the searchable fields for a flow or a form. Right now we have employee name set up as a searchable field. So if I looked at the submissions here for the expense report, I see employee name, right? Okay, well, I need to make a change now. I also want to add the total amount here. So I go into my expense report, I click here to bring up the flow properties, I click the link, I find my field. None of this has changed, this is all the same. I pop the grand total over there, I click finish, and I save. Now, I know that future submissions are going to reflect these changes. However, I want all my submissions to reflect this change, the ones that I have. They're my existing ones. So what do? Well, off hours, of course. All you really need to do is click this icon, and it's going to bring up this screen, and there's documentation that describes all of this. But basically, you got a table, and it shows you the previous refresh searchable fields processes that were run before this one. It'll tell you, if it's a tenant, if it's run on the whole tenant, if it's run on the, on a particular form or flow. And speaking of that, by the way, admins and tenant admins can run the form or flow, run this process for a single form or flow too. They just have to go into the designer's homepage, kind of like that. But anyway, so when you're getting ready to, this is a refresh icon. So if you click that, it'll refresh the table. But to start the job, you just click that, and here's a little warning. Make sure if it's a production form that you're not, the flow's not being used. You click submit, and off it goes. It tells you it started. Now, if you're familiar with this, you can stop the job, you can abandon the job, you can do a bunch of things. This is going to be a short one, so when I refresh the table, I now see that designer Jack ran the process for an expense report that was included in the application VAO new features training, right? So it gives you some information there. Now, if I go back to the flows and I check my submissions, I now see that the employee name and the grand total are, in fact, searchable fields for this workflow. All right, that's a cool one. This one is a kind of a little one, but I kind of liked it, so I threw it in. This is the message control. Now, I know we've all tried to use a message control as a spacer. On a form, you have an image, you want to center it, in previous releases, you could pull a message control from the palette, drop it on the canvas, right? Make it as wide as you have to. But we had to, in previous releases, you had to put like a space or something in the message property for the message control to act like a spacer. It never accepted, you couldn't set it to an empty string, but now you can. So now with this message control in 8.0, you can just pull it down, drop it in, delete the text in the message field, change the message type to none, and you got your spacer. So that's a little one, but it's nice because now you don't have to worry about that. And the last one I want to discuss is I just want to make you aware that the access control list descriptions have changed. For example, the description changed. They still do the same thing, but we're calling them different things now. So in previous to 8.0, the first permission in the access control list used to be who can use the form or flow. Well, we changed that to who can start the form or flow. Okay, but the truth is, the choices, even though they've got different, text. They're still the same. So when you select that, you're going to get these choices now. This is the flow visibility settings, right? If you pick anyone, that means, anyone, login not required. That's one of the choices. That's the same as setting the flow to public. If you pick authenticated users, login required, that's the same as setting the flow to public intent. If you set the designers, owners only, if you pick that choice, it's the same as setting it to private. So the function's the same. It's just the text has been changed to make it a little more intuitive. Finally, I'd just like to remind you that we're going to upgrade the Fravo Cloud to version 8.0 on December 1st at 6 a.m. in the morning, like we usually do. When you get the announcement, there'll be links to the release notes. So I encourage you to go to the release notes. They're not finalized yet, but they will be by Saturday to see some of the other features that I didn't talk about today. But I really want to encourage you to take a minute, even if you're an in-house customer, take a minute to read this planning for 8.0. As I said, it talks about a lot of the things that we talked about, but it also talks about other stuff that you may want to know, about this version. And that's it for pretty much that covers the major feature changes in 8.0. It's 12:15, so I can we can unmute, and if anybody has a question, we can answer some questions. But I did that. Yes, please. Or you guys can unmute yourself, maybe.
I was going to hide in the background. One here, kind of.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you.
Do it together as both schools in one place, you see.
It's the same people that we had.
Yeah. I might go and hide in the background. Not be on there on official business, but I want to hear what they tell parents, but also because it's for me as well, because I'm a parent. Because they're.
Okay. Any other questions? I didn't get that. I guess. Nancy, you have a question? No. Paul, any questions? Paul, did you have a question?
Yes, I do.
Go right ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Under the tabs, when you're saying that you have to click the submit button to save, do you have to click on each tab submit button, or if you make multiple changes, can you just click on one submit and we'll save all of them?
Yeah, you can click on the submit, but you have to remember to do that.
Yeah, but I mean, do you have to do it on each tab?
No. You could go to the, you could just go to the, like you can make a change here and a change here and a change here and a change here.
Okay.
Right, and then when you're all done, click submit.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Just don't forget.
Yes.
All those changes, then it's, you're going to be annoyed if you lose them all. Okay. Let's see. Who else had a question here? If you have a question, you raise your hand and maybe I can grab you there. Mike? Mike, you have a question?
I do. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
On the save thing, just real quick. After you submit, do you still have to hit the normal save icon? That we've done in the past?
Hang on. You mean this save icon?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yes.
You said yes?
Yes. So
Okay.
here and then save. Yes. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, that
Also, we're an in-house customer. If we want to use 8 and start designing in 8, can we use that in the data, download it when 8 comes out for in-house and just import all the forms and data and use it from there, or do we need to wait?
that's a very good question. Are you saying that you would like a version of 8 that you can play around with, or?
Well, no, I mean, we're head right in the middle of trying to design all these forms, and obviously there's some nice features in here that would benefit us that in the process of doing so. So,
Yeah.
It would be nice to be able to design them in something that's version 8, whether it's the cloud or in-house or whatever, and then use those forms until we're able to actually use them in-house, and then bring the data over into our in-house database.
Right. Let me find out what the plan is for that. Because
Sure.
I'm pretty sure the in-house release is going to come out kind of early next year, maybe. But let me check on that, and I'll see if they have a plan. If there's like an official plan for our in-house customers to take advantage of the features in 8.0. I don't blame you for wanting them. Makes your life a lot easier.
No, this is definitely take everything everybody's been talking about for a while and put them in there. Is the flashing bullseye, is it also available in the drag and drop on the form builder?
You know what? Not yet, I don't think. But I'll make sure they put that in.
Yeah, that one is definitely would be nice in there.
Yeah.
What about quick approve? Do you still have to have an approval control designated to it?
Yes. Yeah, that hasn't changed. It's just setting it up.
Sure.
The task info and that is on the tab now, but yeah, you still have to have the approval control.
And the view my task, is that literally just attached to whoever submitted the step, or is it also somehow you're having to build rules to hide and show sections, or does that play into it at all?
No, it's the person that performed it pretty much for now.
You don't have to worry about your business rules and show hide and all that with it.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
At least I haven't come across any issues with that, but
Probably just, or is it?
Yeah, it's just a read-only copy. It's almost like they took the XML and popped it up there. You know what I mean, kind of thing.
Sure. So, what about the search submissions? Essentially, that's a replacement for that, right? We don't have to now also give them access to the submission tab and search from there. They can just go back into their My Task and find things that pertain to them, right?
Well, I don't know if I'd cancel the submissions. I mean,
Okay.
you probably want both. I would wait on that decision.
Sure.
And here's the thing. I know we're making many changes in those areas, like in the submission and tasks, in the few planned for future releases. So you
Sure.
you want to wait and see what shows up in those releases too.
Yeah. I want to train them for something that they won't use.
Yeah, right. So I would hold off. Let me find out about the in-house, and I'll get back to you. I have your email, right? Hopefully you.
I know I'm clogging all this up for questions, but I kind of was writing them down here as we went through here. Is it okay
No.
if I ask another one?
Shoot.
Is it okay if I ask another question?
Yeah, go right ahead.
So the reassign to another email,
Yes.
can you essentially use that same process to resend the email that was originally sent to the same user, just in case they lose it, it goes to spam, or you just need to get them sent something, or is there another way to do that?
Yeah, well, I mean, we always had you could reassign it to you, kind of yourself, sort of, right, and then send it again.
Okay.
So that this is
I was,
this might be better, I think.
yeah, because if you could essentially just reassign it to the same email, it would just regenerate the step email, right?
Yeah. Yes, it will.
Okay. All right, I'll get off here. Thank you.
All right, make sure I have your email. If I don't, I'll find you so I can find out about the in-house. Robert, did you have a question? Robert?
Yes. Yeah, I had a couple quick questions. Number one, it sounds like you're already going to be looking into as far as the ETA for the on-prem version.
Yeah.
Second question, with all these changes, are there any changes in the analytics? So as far as, looking at the processes and the workflows through the reporting, I'm just wondering if any of the flow changes actually report up through that as well.
As far as I know, I don't think so, but I'll check on that and let you know.
Okay.
I don't.
Because I saw you going through your normal submission look, but I didn't know if you could actually take a look inside, under the administrative My Task and take a look at your insights just to see what's being displayed there if there's any additional changes.
That's a very good point. Yeah, let me check on that. I'll let you know. I'm going to send you guys. I'll send everyone the recording, and I'll let you know what I find out when I send that.
Thank you.
No problem. Another question? Did you have another one, or?
No, that's it for right now.
Okay, so we want to know about the reports. Okay. Very good. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you so much for attending. It was a pleasure hanging out with you guys today. And I'll get back to you on those questions, and I will send a recording of the session. All right? Everybody take care, and we'll see you at the next one. I'm going to end it now.